The springing of summertime. As the white horse of winter retreated and receded from the lands and seas of doom, wherever the white and purple snows melted, the world became full of bloom and boon, and soon the lands were strewn with every creature of good nature and fair tune, and so too were the seas and shores and shallows and lagoons thus hewn, with every creature of color and shape and size and degree, and henceforth all were blessed and aided by the elfin gods of each domain. Within the elfin domains there were many creatures and willed things beyond count, and each family filled a niche in the world, or scratched an itch in the world, but all were enriched in the world, because the blessings of the gods had been stitched in the world of doom. Wherefore their dancing formed a new hitch in the world, and their children sang a new pitch in the world, and their grandkins ushered a switch in the world of doom. By this many beings of nature became noble. These noble-willed beings came to be among the good-natured beings on land and sea. The good-willed beings were called animals, and they submitted to the natural order of life. These animals were wild-willed and ignoble, but all of them were still good and necessary. What is more, the wild-willed beings held onto their sparks of the wild from the elder flame, which was made wherever divine fires met divine rhyme. The noble-willed beings of doom surrendered their sparks of the wild, and became ordered and domesticated, wherefore they lost the fires within, and became kinder-willed and duller-witted, because the world was full of blessings. Therefore, there were many kinds of wild-willed and noble-willed animals of nature in the world of doom, and they were called wild or noble, to distinguish them from the unnatural beings of chaos, who were ill-willed. The elfin gods blessed all the animals, but they favored the strong-willed Feline, who bore the image of Freya's godsteed, and the sinewed Baron, who bore the image of the goddess Ursula, and the graceful Diren, who bore the image of the great white stag, and the hopping Heron, who bore the image of the goddess Rabbit, and the upright Primordiaten, who bore the image of the children of men and mother. Wherefore the Primordiaten were most favored of all by the elfin gods in the world of doom, because they bore the nearest image of the Jotun gods. So and so, there were domesticated kinds of noble-willed animals on land, but most sacred to the elfin gods were the loyal Kinainen, who bore the image of the nine-tailed fox-god called Ar, and the gentle Bavinen, who bore the image of the primordial mother called Aurhumla, and the hungry Borinen, who bore the image of the gift-boar called Gullinbursti, and the intelligent Elephantinen, who bore the image of the elephant goddess called Ganesha. Yet in all the world of doom there was not yet the kind of animal called equinen, in the image of the god-steeds. Indeed, the animals called horses and their hoof-kinds called equinen were held most sacred amongst the gods of the god-grove, and existed in every other tree of life other than Yggdrasil. Therefore, the god-steed Zephyros, who inhabited the summer isles on the far side of doom, remained the onliest and loneliest of beings without kinds or kins in all the world. There were also many wild and noble kinds of beings beyond counting in the seven seas, but most sacred to the elfin gods were the clever Delphinen, who bore the image of the goddess Delphine, and the giant Valen, who bore the image of the Jotun Hjalvan, and the shelled Tortoloinen, who bore the image of the cosmic tortoise, upon which the divine god-grove was planted, and the well-changed Octopoden, who bore the former image of their chaotic mother Kraken, and the generous Marinen, called Merfolk, who bore the image of both land and sea, which was most like the ancient one, called Enki. Wherefore the Marinen were most favored of all by the elfin gods in the seven seas of doom. So and so, there were many chaotic beings and things beyond counting on land and sea, and some were neither good nor bad, and indeed many proved useful and harmless, but all were chaotic. Of these were the slithering wormen, and their many kinds, who bore the image of the dragons, without wings or arms, and the skittering vermin, and their many kinds, who bore the image of the trickster god, called rat, and the many wölfen, and their many kinds, who bore the image of the fenlingen, who in turn bore the image of the giant Fenrirach, and the eight-legged arachnen, who bore the image of the goddess Ariadne, and the six-legged myrmidon, who bore the image of the ant-god, called Myrmex, and the ilk-shelled Torlinen, who bore the corrupted image of the cosmic tortoise, and the bloodthirsty children of the high terror Drakel, who in turn bore the image of the chaos god, called Bat, and the big-footed Gigantelingen, who bore the image of the corrupted Jotun gods. And there were many more kinds of all kinds, but the most hated and hunted of all were the chaotic Decapoden, who bore 8 arms and 2 tentacles in the image of their mother Kraken in the great whirlpool, whence all squids rise. And just as the many willed beings of every kind filled the domains in the spring age of the great summer season, so and so the many elfin gods of every domain filled the world of doom with prophecy and poetry and song and story and dance and display and every other form of art that is pleasant to see and hear and feel and taste and smell or every other sense. Then with bows of music and bows of light and bows of magic, they made every kind of colored music that is good and holy in the world. And they set the lyrics of the winds and waters, and soils and stones, and sands and snows, to the tunes and chords and melodies of their music, so that the past could be shared in the present with the future by the sowing and storing of colors, whence all stories rise. In the late spring age of the summer season of the final Godday, the lands of doom and the 7 seas were replete with noble-willed beings and good-natured animals. So it was the elfin gods of every domain of doom contributed in part to the epic elfin song called Isagenend, Ovazagenend, Ovaseasonend, or the sagas of the sages of the ending of the seasons. This 3-part epic included the Odes of Anon, which were the ancient songs of the spirits, and the Immerspringenlieden, which were the songs of the seeds of the Immerspring, and third were the songs of summertime, which were the stories of the elfin gods of doom. Within each of these parts were many sacred songs and poems and wisdoms beyond count and counting, and altogether the epic became known as the legend of Season's End. In total, the epic saga required a full year to recite, from beginning to end, but its ending was also its beginning in endless cycles. Thus, the divine stories were woven as epic sagas of sagely songs throughout the lands and seas of doom, whence all frosted fates rise. Thank you for visiting Frostheim as an honored guest. Like and subscribe on YouTube, and check out my Patreon for complimentary content, including my novel, Animal Farce. As they say in Coralia, may you die in valor, and dine in Valhalla.